The following readings are from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. Each week we read from both scriptures as prescribed by Yogananda ji and by his Guru Sri Yukteswar ji, who was guided by Baba ji to compare the two scriptures to show the same underlying truths between them. This is from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda, and this week titled The Eternal Now. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. When will I find God? Many devotees have asked this question because worldly goals require time, usually for their fulfillment. We imagine time to be a factor on the spiritual path. And so it is, but only because we think it is. God is as much as with us now as He will ever be. It is not He who needs to come to us, we need to come to Him. And that process of coming is a matter of transforming our self-perception. In the Gospel of St. John chapter 4, Jesus Christ says, "Say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest." There is a practical teaching in these words, apart from their statement, that we have God already and have only to realize the truth. Jesus is saying, lift up your eyes and look. To hold the eyes uplifted is the best position for meditation, for the seat of superconscious lies at a point midway between the eyebrow in the frontal lobe of the brain, just behind that point. This point is known also as the Christ center. By lifting up your eyes and concentrating there, you will find it easier to enter the state of ecstasy. That is why saints in every religion have often been observed during states of deep inner communion with their eyes uplifted. Focused on the inner light, white, as Jesus said, already to harvest. The Bhagavad Gita goes further into this meditative teaching in the 6th chapter. It states, "Holding the spine firm, the neck and head erect and motionless, let the yogi focus his eyes at the starting place of the nose, the point between the eyebrows. Let not his gaze roam elsewhere. In meditation, tell yourself, I have Him already. I am alive forever in the divine light." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Okay, so the reading from Whispers from Eternity. This is Make Me Thy Butterfly of Eternity. This is from a book of prayer poems by Paramahansa Yogananda. I have burnt my past, destroying every seed of evil destiny. I have stridden bravely through the strewn ashes of my past and future fears. I am the eternal now, having torn to shreds my enclosing cocoon of ignorance with the sharp knife of free will. Now I am thy soaring butterfly of eternity, flitting freely through immeasurable skies of time. The beauty of my wings I spread out through nature everywhere to entertain all beings. My wings are sprinkled with suns and stardust. Lo, I am beautiful. May every silken thread that shrouded my past folly be severed forever. See, they trail now behind me, only adding to my beauty as I wing my way to my own self in thee. This topic, the eternal now, is one that we can approach from different angles, different perspectives. And Swamiji and Master both spoke of, Master just even in this poem, the eternal now being living in the present, being out of time. And in a way, it can seem that time really does constrain us. In fact, even in the reading, Master says, Swamiji writes that we think it will take time to find God, And it does take time, but only because we think it does. So on the one hand, it sort of seems exciting, and then on the other hand, frustrating. That, well, we think it takes time, so it does take time. So let's just think it doesn't take time. But somehow it still takes time. Master had a disciple who said, when Master said something like this, don't think, when will I have God? Will I have him eventually? Have him right now. And Master's disciple said to him, but sir, if I said I was free right now, I wouldn't be. Would I? And Master said, yes, you would, but you've answered your own question by saying I wouldn't be. You see, we just have it in our minds. And so it's a little bit frustrating in a way that the only thing preventing us is our mind, but knowing that somehow doesn't help at all. You see, so we still have to work with the tools they've given us, but we can still use that insight. First of all, time does seem something that we have to deal with, that we have no control over. And yet, if you think about it, there are times when we aren't limited by time. For example, let me go out a little bit further to give an example. So, in the next yuga, which hopefully this talk will not last until the next yuga. I say that because it's supposed to be like 1,200 years from now. So, or I guess 2,400. Well, minus whatever we are in right now. So, in Treta Yuga, Master says we banish the illusion of time. So that's something. First of all, to think of time as an illusion is something to think about, and also that we can overcome it, we can banish it, it no longer constrains us. That seems pretty far out, and it is. After all, we're not in Treta Yuga, so that seems sort of something beyond us. And yet, in this yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Sri Yukteswar wrote, we banish the illusion of space. That space no longer constrains us the way it used to, and that we can start to relate to. I mean, after all, if someone in America calls you and says, va, you can be there in about 36 hours or so from now, door to door. And you can be on the other side of the world. And even more than that, if they don't say va, but they say solinga, you can pick up the phone and you can talk to them right now. And even more than that, what Pakamudiyama, I'm getting to the end of my vocabulary here, but you can turn on the phone and you can see them. And oh, you got a haircut, and oh, it just right then, instantly. And so we have this sense that space doesn't really separate us the way it used to. Even when we were moving here to Chennai from parts unknown, far away America. I say that because America doesn't seem far away at all, as I'll explain in a moment. But also, Swamiji said he smiled when he was he said in Madras. After all, it was Madras then, and 1958, and he was reading in the newspaper where they were commenting on these exotic American ideas. And of course, for him, being in Madras was exotic, but it's just the same. Whatever is sort of beyond our familiarity is exotic. First time I heard of a muraka sandwich, I thought, wow, that's exotic. Muraka, I know, but sandwich. Anyway, it was Vasudeva who introduced us to those. I wouldn't recommend them unless you have a hearty digestion. So we can see that space is no longer constraining us in the way it used to. And anyway, as I was saying, when we first came here from America, we met our neighbors. This was in Alwarpet at Surendra Court, for those of you who were there back then. Thank you. Something in my throat. And we met them, and they met us, and we were sort of, so you are our new neighbors, and they were friendly. But they said, you've come from America, and they said, we have children, but they're not here. My son is in Seattle, in Bellevue. And Darmini laughed. That's where she was born. And that's where she lived. So our brand new neighbors in Alwarpet were connected to Bellevue, Washington, just very intimately, very closely. Again, the world is just shrinking in terms of our different connections and associations that we have with it. So if we can see how, and some of us can remember in our lifetime, how it didn't used to be this way. I mean, I remember a time before Indigo Airlines and so on. There was, of course, Air India and Indian Airlines, if you remember them. But, even flights were not nearly as common as they are now, and it just seemed that India itself was very far separated. Also with, even within India, people in their jobs, often moving around to different states and different regions, because to do what you did here, do it over there, and so on. It's been, maybe something to do with corporations, but everything is just an instrument of the divine, not always consciously, and not always pushing us towards the divine, except perhaps, chasing us towards the divine because we want to get away from it. But still, this mixing, this breaking down of boundaries, this understanding how we're all the same, and there is no space, is very, this mixing has been very helpful for that. So in that way, that we remember a time when space was more constraining. I mean, even long ago, Daviji asked me, because my father speaks Tamil, unfortunately it was one of the genes I did not inherit from him, but she would say something in Tamil, and I didn't really, I would say, Pavakai! And she would say, okay, so I would say chakkai, which I guess actually is more Malayalam. Chakka is jackfruit, but anyway, I didn't know anything, still don't. And then I said, etikal puchi. But again, like I said, this is the kind of conversation I can have, flies and spiders and jackfruit. And she said, why are you shouting? And I had to think about that. I said, well, I've only heard Tamil when my father is speaking on the landline, from the U.S. to Kerala. Basically, in those days, you more or less had to shout to be heard over the line. So, that was just, again, it's just so different now, how things are. And so in the same way, we can start to imagine what it would be like to be beyond time, or see hints of how we are beyond time even now. For example, just the sheer fact of audio recording, video recording, allows us to travel back in time quite easily. We can see videos of Swamiji from years ago, and it seems like he's right here now. We can see... we can listen to audio recordings of Master's voice, and we can hear it. I mean, just imagine if we had audio recordings of Sri Yukteswar's voice, Babaji's voice, Lahiri Mahashai's voice. Well, Babaji isn't bound in time the way they were, but still, just that there's a little video clip of Sri Yukteswarji that one of Master's disciples took when they went to India, and just to see, all you see is Sri Yukteswar move from side to side and sort of swish his, veshti, this little cloth that he has. And it's thrilling, but I mean, I think he did more in his life than just go like this. And, if we could hear his voice, Bengali, whatever, just to hear it. But we do have that for Master, thank God. We don't have to guess what does Master's voice sound like. And the recordings have such clarity. They're so clear that it really feels like he's speaking right now. And then, of course, in a way, he is. And so to accept that, okay, I can travel in time that way. We see videos of ourselves or photos of ourselves back in time. And, it can be a sobering experience as the years go on. I mean, I was watching some videos of myself with friends. And there were a few times when I came into the scene of the video and someone said, is that you? Yeah. I mean, for me, it's sort of, I remembered being there, and, I've looked in the mirror each day, and there's sort of progressive sort of increments of things, but still, it seemed very much me. But that was at least, I appreciated that. A friend of ours, I said, here's a picture of me with my friend Gary McSweeney, and they were looking at it. One person got it. They said, "You're not in this picture, are you?" It's sort of like, well, either I'm the 6-foot-tall white man, or I'm the other person in the photo. But that seemed beyond the realm of possibility for them. There was so much hair and so few wrinkles and so on, I guess. Swamiji met someone who he had known when he was in SRF, and they met him many years later at Ananda Village, I think it was, but I'm not sure where. And they looked at him and they said, "Is it really Kriyananda?" And he said, "It makes you think a bit." Just sort of. Because for us, we just think of ourselves just the way we've always been. We remember those things if we do. The same eyes, the same soul is just there. But for other people, they perhaps note the passage of time as it appears on us. But more than just overcoming the past and so on, we can also think of the not even being beyond time, not thinking of past or future, just now. For example, when you have a wonderful experience, you very often you're just in the moment. See, as Swamiji said, too much of the time people are either worried about the future or sort of upset, sad about the past. And also, we can sort of live in the future, that I'll be happier in the future. And because why? Because I'm not happy right now. But the thing is, when we are happy right now, when there's just a perfect moment, then we're very much living in the present. We almost want to absorb the present. Let me just be in this moment. If you think of, for example, if you think back to a particularly happy time, why don't we just take a moment? Let's just close our eyes and think of a time in the past when we felt particularly joyful, happy, fulfilled, not just sort of abstractly, like think of an experience that you had, a time in your life where you had that experience, had that feeling, rather, of joy, of satisfaction. Okay. You can open your eyes if you wish. It reminds me of when Master was giving a talk, as you've heard on the recording, where he says, close your eyes, think of all the things that you have done. And then he says, now, if you think of all the bad things that you have done, then you will feel weighed down by those. So instead, think of all the good things that you've done. I mean, such an amazing teaching just in that. Then he starts to talk, and then he says, now now open your eyes. And we love it when we hear that, because it's just so human. It's so dear. It makes him feel so close, It's so easy to think of Master and Swamiji as sort of, when there is a time for a talk, they just materialized out of thin air, gave their talk, and then disappeared again. And it's just not like that. When you see the film of Master performing that wedding ceremony, and at the beginning he says, hold on just one moment. Will you come on, please? Will you come on quick? To people who are coming to be in the shot. And it's just so normal. It's so natural. Every time he would cough or something or say, there has never been any fights, and you hear him knocking on wood, to say, I hope it'll always be that way. Sorry, this microphone seems particularly affectionate today. It keeps... Okay. So, that makes him feel so close to us, and it should, because we really want to feel close to him, and we don't want there to be any barriers with Master, with Swamiji, and we have to take time to get to know them. We were watching some videos of Swamiji, and it was the same kind of thing, where you saw him in between moments. And so in between, before the lecture, after the lecture. So you really want to, again, make the masters and close to you and you close to them. Feel that closeness. But as I was saying earlier, this experience, this happy experience that we had, hopefully it felt real to you even now. Maybe when you were remembering it, you started to feel some of that joy and peace again. And that gives us another hint at moving beyond time. Because when we have a superconscious experience, remember the 3 states of consciousness of the mind: conscious mind, subconscious mind, superconscious mind. The conscious mind is the mind that you're in right now, I hope, where we're relating to what's right in front of us. And each one of these, Master said, relates to a position of the eyes. If the eyes are looking straight ahead, we are accessing the conscious mind. He says when we look down, we're accessing the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind, basically you can say its job is to store the impressions of the past. It is like the great hard drive. It records everything, not only in this life, but in the lives before, which in a way is comforting because, first of all, one aspect, he said, everything is in there. So if you've forgotten something, you haven't actually lost it. It's still there somewhere. And you might have this experience where suddenly you remember something that you had completely forgotten. I don't mean, what is that phone number again? You're trying to work it out. I don't mean that. I mean, somebody reminds you of something, or you smell something that can trigger a memory for various reasons, or you see a picture. Somehow you remember some episode in your life that you'd completely forgotten. Not necessarily a negative one that you've blocked out, but as far as you were concerned, it never happened, and suddenly it's back. Suddenly it's there again. If you haven't had this experience, just wait to get a little older. When I was young, I had this very clear memory, but I also didn't have that many things to remember. I mean, only been a few years I'd been running around, so I've been sort of first standard, second standard, third standard, But as you get older and older, there's a lot of stuff there to sift through. But all those memories are still there. But the subconscious mind is passive. It only stores what we put into it. In other words, it doesn't think on its own. It just records. It just receives. And so sometimes people will say, if you're thinking about a problem, go to sleep and let your subconscious give you the answer. And we may have had the experience that you're puzzling over a problem and you wake up in the morning and you have the solution. But if the only way it can come from the subconscious mind is if it's a thought you've had before, or a memory you've had before, or sort of pieced together maybe of some things you've had before. In other words, the subconscious can't give you anything new. It can remind you of something you've forgotten, which is not new, it's nouveau. I think that's a Spanish or a French word, which means new to me. So it's not really new, but it's new-ish. But it's just a memory. It is the superconscious mind that gives us intuition, gives us new insights, helps us to perceive the truth. That part of our mind we access when the eyes are looking upward, just as was mentioned in the reading that Prem did. And so this is where we are more in touch with our soul. We're more in touch with our eternal nature. The superconscious mind is also beyond time. And how do you know, or how can you experience that? Because if you have a superconscious experience, for example, in meditation, or if you have a superconscious dream, a particularly vivid dream, a blessed dream, that changed you especially, is one hallmark of it being a superconscious dream, that when you try to remember it, when you put your mind back there, so to speak, because it seemed to happen in time before now, you can feel it as if it's happening right now. It's vivid. Every detail is there. It's almost as if you're re-experiencing it. And so that's another hint or proof that it was superconscious. It doesn't fade with memory. It doesn't, it was kind of nice. There was some green. I don't remember. It's not that way. It's vivid. It's dynamic to your consciousness. So again, sometimes people wonder, Am I having a superconscious experience? Was this a real moment of clear intuition, or was it imagination? Was it subconscious? And that these are some ways you can tell. If it's vivid, if it's easy to remember, not just recall, but to almost re-experience in that moment. And it's not true only for meditators, of course. This is a part of the way we're made. I remember there was an interview with Richard Feynman, who was a famous physicist. And he was talking to another scientist about the moment that he had solved a particular problem. It was the Dirichlet equation for the half of a person who might remember what I'm talking about. And if you do, please tell me, because I don't really remember Dirichlet's equation. He was a mathematician who did certain things, but it was an equation apparently that needed solving. And Feynman said he was working on it and struggling, and then he just sat back and he looked at it and he said, and I just tapped it, and the whole thing opened for me. Fine. Good for him. That's why he's a famous physicist. But what he said, I remember everything about that experience. I remember the feeling of the paper on my fingers. I remember the smell of the graphite in the pencil. I remember what time it was. I can feel almost the temperature of the room. He was recalling every detail of that experience as if he were having it again. So it's very likely a superconscious experience. That's what it is. Again, it transcends time. I'm saying these things to try to make them seem more accessible, more familiar. If you've had any time like that, then we do have this sense that time really is an illusion. I can be back there all of a sudden. And so this leads us to say, well, then do we want to live if we have freedom over time, should we live in the past then? Well, maybe, but the thing is, the present has a way of making itself known rather in inconveniences or troubles. If there's things we have to work on now, we can't just live in the past. And that's one thing we saw in Swamiji. In one sense, he was always with Master, and you might he was always with Master, and you might think in one sense, is what I meant to say, that would mean he was in the past. There was another disciple who said, I live in those years, which is sweet in a way because she was with Master, but what about everybody else who isn't able to live in those years? And, could she bring some of the stuff from those years and share it with everybody? That's how Swamiji was. He was living with Master now. And he would say, I had a dream of Master now, or I had this intuition from Master now, or I feel Master wants this, not wanted, wants. So again, this is one way that it's easy to talk about something that otherwise we will have to wait till Treta Yuga to understand or experience, is because we saw it in Swamiji. So if not living in the past, do we want to live in the future? Well, maybe, but how do we know the future is going to be all that different from now? Imagine if you spent your whole of your lifetime, just can't wait till I get into the next lifetime. Well, guess what? If you really prayed that hard enough, you probably prayed it in the last lifetime. Thank you. Pushkala has a big smile. She's put it together. Because guess what? If we prayed it in the last lifetime, here we are now. Here's the result of our prayer, living in this lifetime, and it's exciting at first, but then you think, how is it going to be any different in the next lifetime? Oh, it'll be like I'll be still flying my flying saucer around wondering if I paid the insurance and still mad that when I first got it, it had some engine trouble and could only go to sub-light speed. And it's all the same thing. You can be in a UFO traveling around and still have a headache, still wondering who forgot to pack the Myserpock. It's because it's not any future time. It's not time that's restraining us, as Prem read, and it's really an important thing. God is as much with us now as He will ever be. It is not He who needs to come to us. We need to come to Him. And that process of coming is a matter of transforming our self-perception. Our self-perception. Not just our perception, which is our ability to perceive, our ability to observe, to relate, to understand, our self-perception, our perception of ourselves. That's the hint that we have to move beyond time as it relates to ourself, that God is with me now. Master said that. In fact, the prayer, or the prayer of self-realization, or I'm not getting the word right, or maybe the definition, self-realization is the understanding of body, mind, and spirit, that I am even now in possession of the kingdom of God, that I do not have to pray for it to come to me. All I have to do is increase my knowing. And so I'm paraphrasing that a little bit, but I mean, after all, that's this path. Self-realization is our path. So we should know what Master meant when he said self-realization. And again, changing our self-perception. Doesn't that sound related to self-realization? Realizing who we really are, what our true self is. And we can start to understand that, because especially if we've traveled around, especially outside of our home country, and you find a whole bunch of people functioning completely happily and blissfully without dosa. I don't know how, but somehow they manage, and they're fine, and so in other words, people do things completely differently in their own way, and we can walk around saying, where is the sambar? And they say, nowhere. Go back home if you want it. And so we have to adjust to their way of being if we want to survive, function, relate to them. But then we have to ask, well, why do I love the things that I love? Why do I find them so familiar? When you're in America, Chana Bhatura is really exotic, and I was so glad when I found a place that served it. But when you're here, it's just down the street, and it's just familiar. It's almost nothing. I would never say Chana Bhatura is nothing, especially because I can't eat it anymore. I'm allergic. But the thing is, these things are so common to us here, but we go somewhere else and they're not. And so when we begin to question what if in the next life I'm not in, Chennai? What if I'm in some other part of the country? Maybe I've been in other parts of the countries before. Sairam, who is a friend from here, said when he went to Canada, he felt such an affinity to the place, such a connection with the people, and he said, and they all seem to feel it with me too. And, Canada is a cold place, not even compared to Chennai, compared to anywhere. And so, for him to feel at home and comfortable, it had to be an inner sort of comfort, because it would have been difficult otherwise. And so that sense, sometimes we have a particular attraction to a country. Sometimes we have a sort of aversion to a country. It may be because of our last life there. I have an aversion to beets, and I've wondered if it's beetroot, and I wonder if it's because I just lived in a country full of beets. Because just even the thought of them makes me cringe. And one day I decided I was going to overcome time and space and not be bound by self-definition, and I am someone who doesn't like beets, and I'm going to eat them. And so I did eat them. And it was not easy, and I barely held them down, but I did. Then I got a stomach ache. So there's, there's something in my cells that just rejects that memory, whatever it is. So this feeling of being in the past, being in the future, it won't help us. We just have to be now, because the past was now at the time. And if you don't believe me, just 5 seconds ago it was now, but now it's then. And now it's now, but oops, it's gone. Now it's now. You see, the only time we have is now, and if we're in the future, it will be now also. Swamiji commented on that. There's a well-known book called Pride and Prejudice, and there are sort of a few sisters, and there are 5 sisters, and the youngest one is a bit foolish, and someone says to her, the wiser one says to her something about how you will see the error of your ways, and it will very much matter to you in 5 years. And Lydia says, 5 years? Who cares what happens in 5 years? But Swamiji said, you very much will care when 5 years comes, because it will be now. Think of 5 years ago. Again, the older you get, it doesn't seem that long ago. So this, 5 years ago was 2020. Remember 2020? This little thing called COVID? But that was already 5 years ago. In a way, it actually seems like a long time ago. But if we put our minds there, let's not, because you would all disappear. We would all be in lockdown again. We were in lockdown with Prasanna because we basically said, look, we need your help. His father was quarantined in Singapore, and so he wasn't at home. And we said, in order for us to all basically work together, we need to be quarantined together so we won't get each other sick. And one of the first, you remember how quiet it was during lockdown? No traffic, no noise. Suddenly we were all back in, true Madras Chennai forests again. That's all you heard was the quails who were not in lockdown and the wind in the trees. But then they were like barricading whole neighborhoods. Disease here, enter at your peril. No one will enter or exit except, anyway. Not to finish that thought, but basically you can understand what I mean. Headed for the crematory ground. So anyway, then we were worried because we heard if this neighborhood was shut down and this neighborhood was shut down, and then someone was coming. We heard an announcement. And we said, Prasanna, what is he saying? You are all now in lockdown. You will never see the sun. Prasanna said, he's selling fruit. so he started, Yalaki Param, Anji Param. Oh, okay. We didn't, it was early days back then. So we can only be in the now, and we can only be, when you're fully absorbed, for example, in meditation, you don't even really think about who I am, where I am. In a deep meditation, sometimes you lose even sort of your perspective in space. You don't have the sense, am I facing north, am I facing east, am I, if you can't really feel where you're sitting, you just sort of, I am. I'm not even really tuned into any of these things. If you haven't had that experience in meditation, you might have had it when you first wake up from sleep, especially if you've been traveling, if you're in a hotel or in an unfamiliar bed and you wake up, you may not remember exactly, which country am I in? Where if you're falling asleep, you may lose, like, am I on this side of the room, or is the headboard of the bed, or if you've lost that sense, but you still are. You can feel I'm right here. I'm aware of myself that way, that beyond any of these limitations or considerations. So our self definitions we have to release. The easiest way to do that is to just meditate, because I feel joyful. I don't really care, what my PAN number is in this moment, although I guess in a few months we will really care, end of July. But before then, I don't really care what, how I'm feeling. For example, suppose you're meditating in an AC room and you come out of meditation and you're all done, and then suddenly you feel cold. And it doesn't make any sense because the AC has been on the whole time. But especially if you're in an AC room with me, you're probably going to feel cold. I tend to like it a little cooler. But the thing is that suddenly we feel like, we're returning to body awareness. I wasn't really aware on the surface of my body how cold I was. I would say, well, you could turn it around and come out of meditation and say, oh gosh, how hot I am. But if you're really hot in meditation, you turn... It becomes a non-meditation. And so that, I don't know if that experience is possible to have. But, so we want to let go of these self-definitions, that I'm not from this country, I'm not this kind of person. And it's helpful, too, to feel that in yourself in meditation, because you can feel who you are without those things. In the beginning, we have to say, no, but that's me. I mean, if I didn't have these self-definitions, I would kind of be nothing. And yet, if I didn't have a name, if I didn't have my community, if I didn't have whatever. But in meditation, you don't feel all those things and you still feel fine. And some of us have been through life experiences that have broken our self-definitions a bit. I thought I needed this and it was taken away and I'm still okay. Or I needed this person and they're not here anymore and it's sad, but I'm still here and in a way I still feel them. This can be helpful too if you've lost a friendship, which it can be upsetting, of course. But part of what's upsetting in losing a friendship is that that joy that we felt with that friend seemed to come from the friend. Because we felt it when we were with them, and now they're gone, and now we don't feel it as if they've taken it away. But remember, that capacity to feel joy you had the whole time. Someone else could have been with that friend and not felt that. And what you felt was real to you, especially if perhaps your friend has left you in anger, and you realized maybe we weren't as close as I thought we were, but that joy that you experienced was real. In a certain way, it was you experiencing the joy of your own being. It was you experiencing the joy of God. The friend may have been a catalyst, but really the friend was more of a placebo. A placebo is something that, where you give somebody a sugar pill that has no medicinal value, but they take it and say, "Oh, I feel so much better, thank you." That they'll do this when they're conducting sort of medical studies and so on. Give people a pill that actually is supposed to work, and then give people a fake pill to see that if it's just the act of taking a pill that makes people feel better. A friend of mine is a doctor, and she said she was doing this medicine out in this sort of village, and people would come by and say, "Give me an injection." She said, "What's the problem?" "Any injection. I just need an injection." And she said, "Well, I don't really want to inject you with something if there's nothing wrong with you. No, I just need it for health, for strength. Sort of what? Okay, would you like morphine? And would you like glucose? And would you like saline? It doesn't really work that way. But they had this thought of, no, to be strong, I need injections. So this feeling of placebo is that that there's something that tricks us into experiencing joy, but it isn't caused by that thing. So remember that of course keep your friends as long as you can and try to help them and so on, but remember it's always God helping God, God loving God, God loving our friends through us, hopefully, as clear of channels as we can be, and then also God's love coming to us through our friends and in other ways as well. So that letting go of self-definition also means not really accepting other people's self-definitions that they impose on us. They say, "Oh, you are this kind of person," or "I know you are always that way," and so on. Don't listen to that. You don't have to argue with them necessarily, unless you think they'll listen, and then you're not arguing. Otherwise, but don't let it in. Because, nobody knows us as well as we know ourselves on one level, but even we don't know ourselves as well as the Guru knows us, as well as God knows us. So, let's not be limited. And if your mind says, "Yes, but I am this way," again, just rewind the clock to your previous lifetime when you were more or less just the same as you are now, and, plus or minus a little bit. Or jump forward to the next lifetime and gosh, more or less just the same. And here we are, 12th standard again. And so, it's just going to be the same. As Master said, you don't change dramatically from one incarnation to another. He said when you go to sleep, this is being a metaphor for death, but saying literally, when you go to sleep at night, when you wake up, you don't suddenly become an angel by the fact of having gone to sleep and waking up again. He said, you're just the same as you were before. Now, again, with meditation, with Kriya, we can accelerate that process rapidly. So don't think that, well, I guess I'm just on some conveyor belt and I'm just kind of stuck. Because, again, that's not the point. It doesn't take as much time as we think it needs to. But so we really have to work to overcome that thought of not just time, but of self-perception, of self-definition. I'm this kind of person. So try to go deep in meditation and try to feel, first of all, positive, feel joy. Because also when you're in deep meditation, you don't really notice who I am or what I am or where I am. But when you experience joy, you don't even care. Because you're just having that joy. It just is so satisfying, and I'm so happy. And someone says, yes, but what about whatever? I'm not bothered because I'm so satisfied. This is what I've been looking for. And remember that too, because whatever seems to be taken away from us in life, really, we were only seeking it in our own selves, and it's still available there. That beautiful poem, The Hound of Heaven, which Master didn't write, but he read and recorded, the God says to the devotee, all that thy child's mistake fancies as lost, I have stored for thee at home. In other words, all those things we think we lost, God just took them. It says at another time, all that I took from thee I did but take, not for thy harms, but just so thou might seek it in my arms. And so God is always calling us back, always calling us home, much more eagerly even than we are trying to run towards God. So affirm that too. I'm a child of God. I'm not an adult, I'm not a child, if that's a factor. In other words, age is not a factor. That's another thing of time that you have to get over. Some people will really lock us into a particular sort of view because of our age. But it's really nothing at all. Swamiji said, people look at him and said he was old, but he said he saw a picture of himself when he was 5 years old. He said it's the same fellow, just in those eyes. And there's one picture of his too, where for him being young, you can see it. I think it's in the Path, or the New Path, where the photographer had given him an apple to pose with or something. I can't remember the story, but at one point his father said, no, we want a picture of him without the apple, and his father came and took the apple away, and you see the picture of Swamiji. I'm going to get that apple back. And so he had so much willpower. In fact, it's an odd story, but he was I think it was in Bali, I'm not sure. There was apparently he was there with a friend, and there was a woman who was trying to do black magic on Swamiji, as sometimes happens. And the way her particular method is she would light a match, and don't worry, not set people on fire, but she would light a match and then she would use her willpower to point the flame towards the person, and it was a way of piercing their aura or something. Again, just do Kriya and don't worry about these things. But what she did was she held the match and the flame kept pointing at her. She was sitting right behind him, so he couldn't see. I don't know if he was chanting or whatever, but it was pointing at her the whole time. He didn't even know. And she said to this friend, I'll tell you one thing, too much damn willpower. But Swamiji had tremendous willpower, and we should too. Part of that willpower comes from my will. I'm going to make a change. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm going to do something about it. No matter how hopeless it seems, I can still put one foot in front of the other, all of that. There will be times when we have to pick ourselves up, when we have to force ourselves. That's using willpower. Why? Because if it's easy, then we're not using willpower. So I'm so happy. Jupiter is with me. Whenever someone would ask me to look at their astrological chart, which I don't do anymore, by the way, because sometimes people are like, oh, really? And so there was always... they'd always have some Saturn transit or Saturn Mahadasha or Saturn. Maybe they had 3 Saturns in their chart. I don't know. Always shunny. No one ever came and said, oh, look at all of this Jupiter things that I have. Oh, look at my Guru Mahadasha and so on. Because things are going well. And so who cares? Well, it's because it's just happening. Nobody has questions when things are going well. That's what I'm saying. That's when we need to use willpower, when things are difficult. And sometimes we just have to go on a little bit further, or just take one step and things will change. We have to fight. On the other hand, the other side of willpower is not just putting out intensity of effort, which is very real, is also willingness. Being open to the flow, letting God help us, letting Master help us, cooperating with the flow that's trying to happen. For this we need intuition. We need to access the superconscious mind. We need to ask Master, should I do this or not? Try to feel for his response. If you don't feel anything, then start to do something in other words, make your decision and act and put energy in that direction, but still listen. Because sometimes in putting out the energy, you realize this isn't the right thing at all. In other words, it would have been nice if we had heard that before. But for whatever reason, we didn't. But as we start to move forward, then we get the information, we get these hints and so on. It's very important to talk to Master all the time, because again, he'll give you the answers. Talk to God, talk to Swamiji. They'll give you the answers. They're happy to help. It's one thing when you're sitting in the examination hall and you say to the teacher, it may not work, but that's not who Master and Swamiji are. They're not the teachers. They are Amma and Appa. Imagine you're doing your homework and you don't dare ask for help. I mean, it's ridiculous. That's what homework is for. And all of this is just homework. That's all we're doing in life is homework. Because when we finish and we submit our last assignment, we graduate. And we're all done and it's all over. I don't mean death, I mean liberation. Freedom in God. It's rather sobering, as Swamiji said, that the sum total of all our life's experience has to be zero. It all balances itself out in the end. All the karmas balances themselves out to zero. It doesn't feel like zero. It feels like everything, because you're with God. But it's really the ego that comes to zero. It's the ego that is separating us. And Master gave a wonderful image. He said, imagine taking a glass bottle, dipping it in the ocean to fill it with seawater, and then putting a cork in the bottle and then letting it go off into the sea. He said, so are we. That's what we are. We are just this ocean water, the seawater that's floating in the ocean, the same thing. But because we have this glass bottle separating us from it, we feel somehow separate and different. And in a way, we are separated from it. All we have to do is break that bottle and we can merge back into the ocean. And that bottle is the ego. So he said, or you can undo the cork of ignorance. It's a wonderful image that he gave. So let's work on that through meditation, through loving God, through serving others, because serving is another wonderful way to stop focusing on ourselves so much. And I don't mean don't focus on yourself so much. I mean it's exhausting to focus on ourselves so much. And when we serve, it's a relief because we forget that. Even understanding where we are, the seat of ego in our bodies is here, in the medulla. And it's not just something that you hear or you're taught. It's something you can experience. Somebody says, you did that very well. We draw the head back. You feel the tension here. And somebody says, oh my gosh, a baby could have done that better than you did it. And you sort of, really? Like when some master met a famous painter, and master said, how long did it take you to develop your craft? And he said, it took me 20 years. And master said, 20 years to convince yourself that you could paint? And the man, he said, I'd like to see you do as well in twice that amount of time. And master said, give me a week. And in a week, he painted a better picture of Lahiri Mahashai than the artist had done. That was how he met the artist. He had been hired to do a painting of Lahiri Mahashai. And the artist himself, when Master wanted to show the artist the painting, but didn't want to say, this is what I did, because he would have said, oh, it's terrible. So he put it there, and then he hid behind the door. And someone else brought the man in and said, look at this. And he said, who did that? It's better than mine. And Master said, you want to know who did it? And so another thing Master did in his life, this isn't just sort of philosophy, or even just, okay, this is the way we make ourselves feel better. When Master was trying to raise the money for Mount Washington, which was his headquarters, I forget the amount of money. I think it was $45,000 or something like that, but, even now that sounds like a lot, but, it was way more back then. And would it be $1 million or $2 million now? I don't know. But someone said, it'll take you, they needed to pay it in 3 months. And someone said it would take you 20 years to raise that amount of money. And Master said, 20 years to those who think 20 years, 20 months to those who think 20 months, and 3 months to those who think 3 months. and he was able to sort of raise the funds, and people were willing to support it, to buy it within 3 months, down to the deadline, even past the deadline. The last day, with noon, was the deadline, and one person said, "I will come," and someone paid me back a loan I never expected to get back, and I'll give it to you. But then she didn't show up. And so there was another man there saying, "I'm going to buy this place and turn it into a movie school." And Master was wanting to buy it to build an ashram. And so the owner said, "We will wait the rest of the day," even though they had passed the deadline. And then finally the woman, her name was Mrs. Trask, she showed up, and Master had said at that point, "I think Divine Mother likes to make my life interesting, because it's always that. It always adds to the drama. She likes a little excitement too." And so the other thing I wanted to point out, another thing that Master said in terms of our self-definition, is that he said, you don't envy other people in the lives that they have. Don't envy them in the karma that they have, apparently. He said, because, the way he put it, if you could see behind the eyeballs, you would be very happy with your karma and your own life. I mean, that's something, because we can sort of say, well, okay, I guess if I saw deeply into them, I'm okay, I'm happy with how I am. But of course it's true, that's what they think when they look at us also. So you have to wonder then, But of course you're happy for everybody to be happy with who they are. But what could that mean, I wondered? I mean, first of all, someone who's out of karma, a self-realized soul, that's different. They're out of karma, so we want to, be with God. But you may see someone who has something that we want. We may see something. But on the other hand, they may have other lessons to learn that we've already learned, is one way to look at it. Or they may be developing themselves, not to make a comparison, in a way that just wouldn't appeal to us at all. For example, someone who really wants to figure everything out mentally, and that gives them a thrill, but that doesn't give us a thrill. We sort of go more by the heart, or vice versa. In other words, your own nature is best suited to you. And so trust that. And that also means that feel God's love behind the experiences you're given. Sometimes we can feel, for example, a little bit lonely, a little bit left out. I think particularly as yogis, or probably anybody seeking God, we feel a little bit left out just because the whole world isn't seeking God. It's not that kind of yuga. Satya Yuga is maybe a little bit like that, Swamiji said, but this is not that. And so if we feel a little bit on the outside of things, on the one hand, it's not a pleasant feeling. But what are we really looking for? For merging, for connection, and that really can only be found in God. And sometimes that sort of loneliness, which Swamiji described also that he felt, I think it's because the soul feels lonely apart from God. That loneliness is a great motivator. To say, I need to feel that connection somewhere, and where is it? We can be surrounded by people at a party, for example, and feel perfectly lonely still. It's strange sometimes. And so we realize there's something more that I need. So in other words, some experiences are given to us as tests to motivate us to learn our lessons. They're never given as punishment. They're never given out of cruelty. It can seem cruel. We can have hard karmas to go through. And in a way it is, because we didn't ask to be incarnated in the first place. So there's an element. But given that, we can argue with God about that once we get out. We have to get out first. And so we may be able to relook at, you may be able to see in your life tests that you went through that were very difficult. And at the time, just brought you to your knees, and yet maybe you learned something from them that gave you a great strength. I remember once the worst thing happened to me that I could imagine. And it was heartbreaking, and I didn't like it. And it took me about a year to kind of shake off that sort of feeling of what's a good word for it? Despair. Despair is a good word for it. And yet, I had to also admit that this is the worst thing that I had feared, and now it had happened, and here I was. So I had to come up with sort of the new worst thing, because I've already had the worst thing. So what was the second? Now that's the worst thing. And after a while, you say, well, what's the point? Because I thought I couldn't survive such a thing, and I survived it perfectly well. I didn't survive it with a smile on my face. I survived it with a bunch of Kleenex and, handkerchiefs and so on. But I did survive it, and it made me realize maybe I am stronger than I think. Maybe these things aren't as bad as I thought they would be. They were bad, but they weren't devastating. I still felt close to God. I still felt close to Master. I still felt Swamiji was in the body at the time, so there was still that connection even outwardly. So I realized there were many more aspects of my life than just this one disappointing dimension. And we have to also know that on to put it another way, almost all the saints that we read of, they all have gone through challenges. Let's face it, not to mince words, they've all gone through suffering. This is not a path of suffering that we have to suffer in order to find God. That's not the teaching. And yet that suffering often does come as a motivator to find the joy, as a sign to us that we're not going in the right direction. It doesn't mean the outer circumstances that are causing the suffering are our fault, or that they're within our control to fix. That's not always the teaching, because, that can be misleading also. But to inwardly change our perspective, to endure it, is perhaps what the test is about. I was saying to someone, she had listened to the intuition class that we gave recently, and she said, you said something about that if something bad happens to us, it doesn't, like a bad karma, it doesn't mean necessarily that we have done that same thing to somebody else in the past, and that's why it's happening now. But if not, then why is it happening? What lesson is there in it for us if we have a bad karma, but we didn't actually cause it in the obvious way? I kicked someone, and then I forgot about it, and in this life, boom, someone else kicked me, and then they forgot about it. Sorry if I added that a little too bitterly. You know how that is. Someone will, rah, 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 and then the next day, hi, how are you? Nothing ever happened. I see from a few smiles that you may understand. So the thing is that she said, then what am I learning then? I said, sometimes we have karmas that come to us because we're learning not to take things personally. Sometimes something happens and it really had nothing to do with us. And that's the lesson, not to take it personally. And I mean that with kindness, because when I was growing up, a lot of people said to me, don't take it personally. Smack! Don't take it personally. It's just like it's your hand in my face. How else am I supposed to take it? It wasn't like a meteor fell on my cheek. It was thy hand upon it. Anyway, so that's an excuse weak people use so they don't have to change. But the point is that sometimes something happened, it was nothing to do with us. A friend of mine was, we were discussing about how people can erupt in rage and then say, you made me angry, you caused this. But I said, if you were walking past a volcano and it erupted, which happened recently, actually. I wasn't walking by it, but if you've read the news, would you say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize you hadn't had your coffee yet"? No, the thing just erupted anyway. Someone else would have walked by and it would have erupted, or it would have erupted all by itself. You see, we can't take these things on ourselves, even if someone blames us. I feel this way because of you. You feel this way because you feel this way. I feel this way, can't blame it on anybody else either. Someone gets up, someone insults me, I get upset, but Swamiji and Master wouldn't necessarily get upset. I wouldn't be obligated to get upset. I know it's possible to have a different reaction. So that's important for us to own our responsibility. Another reason why a karma comes to us that has nothing to do with us, in the obvious way that we did it so then we receive it, is that we may be learning that there are some circumstances beyond our control. Subtly different from it has nothing to do with us. Has nothing to do with us, has nothing to do with us. This is going to happen and there's nothing we can do about it. And that's okay too. You should, if you're in a situation, do everything you can to move things in your favor or in what you think is right, even better. But if you can't, or you have done, or there's no possibility, then we also have to say, okay, Divine Mother, there's nothing I could do about it, and that's okay. And I say this from personal experience, that these were some lessons that I had gone through, I'm still going through. Swamiji talked about it too, that it's just, all of these are reasons to trust God more. Because that's often what makes us afraid, is that we lose our trust in God. And we don't have to worry that Divine Mother is asleep at the wheel. That we should trust her. We can say, I don't know why, I don't know how, and help me to trust you. Whether I see it, the reason for it, whether I feel it, whether I'll see it in 6 months, a year, but I don't want to lose my trust in you no matter what things are going wrong. Because usually when things are going wrong, it's a matter of perspective. And if we change our perspective, then we realize, okay, well, no, this could be helpful, or this could be motivating, or at least I can accept it and then move on. Because it's happening anyway, why not? Find a way to be happy. Okay? So again, through meditation, through devotion, and especially through the Guru, listening to Master, listening to Swamiji, reading their words, talking to them, listening to them in the moment in your meditation is so helpful, because they have that consciousness of the eternal now. That's part of the reason why, we can say any of this, because we see Swamiji, we hear Master, we see pictures of Master, we see some videos of Master, but more than that, hopefully we feel Master. And that gives us all the answers and help we need. It teaches us on deeper than just mental levels. Okay, so be with them and be with them right now.